Good afternoon and welcome to today's e-commerce chat. I'm Mark Brohan, Vice President of B2B and Market Research Development for Digital Commerce 360, and I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us. We have a really great slate of content planned for this hour, and we hope, as always, you get a lot out of it. Today's webinar and e-commerce chat looks in depth at something very top of mind with manufacturers, which is the term technology stack. These days, as disruption continues to alter the B2B landscape, manufacturers are having to make rapid adjustments to support and to update their digital experience. This will mean support for channels, channel partners, and other B2B customers. And it will also mean employing the tools necessary to deliver the experience to all stakeholders across the board, big, small, or otherwise. So, a lot to unpack here. And boy, do we have the panel and the experts and the murderer's row to unpack this thing for you. So, we're going to look at some anecdotal evidence from some of our surveys at DC360 to kind of look at what's driving some of the technology issues and decision-making on the part of manufacturers. We'll take a look at the landscape for channel partners, what it means and how it will impact today's manufacturing company, what channel strategy affects the overall technology stack for manufacturers, and then get prepared for a lively discussion on all the above. It's going to answer a lot of the questions you folks have today. And as a bonus, for all the attendees who signed up for today's e-commerce chat, we're going to give you a copy of our 2021 B2B manufacturing report, where we break down the manufacturing digital commerce landscape and market with numbers and analysis in general. That's about a $400 value. So we hope you find that to be of some note. But now let's jump into who we have on the panel today. We're pleased to welcome Scott Lingell, Senior Digital Manager, Greylock Family of Companies. We're also pleased to welcome Jay Schneider, B2B Digital Commerce Evangelist and Leader and Consultant, B2B Squared. Jonathan Burdett, Director of Digital Industry Strategy for Manufacturing for Adobe. And Brendan Spear, TreviPay's CEO. So these folks have the knowledge, and we're about to engage in a discussion here, and we're going to showcase some of that knowledge. So on to our first slide. I'm going to take just a minute here to kind of give you some perspective on not so much the technology. We're going to break that down. Our panel knows that. But what I want to spend just a minute or so on here is kind of take a look at what are the challenges and the business strategies driving this pent-up demand for more digital commerce technology across the board by manufacturers. Well, as a case in point, what's driving this is the all digital customer, digital first. So whether it's branch, whether it's e-commerce site, whether it's EDI or e-procurement or marketplace, your digital first customer accelerated over the course of the last 2 years. And now a lot of manufacturers are either expanding the technology stack to take advantage of this increased customer demand for digital channels, or on the flip side, they're behind the 8 ball and they're trying to catch up, because if they don't convert those first-time digital customers now and don't get them into loyal customer land, they're going to fall behind, and that's not good. So what's top of mind from a high level with manufacturers these days is not just the e-commerce platform. I mean, 2/3 of the manufacturers we talked to for one of our recent surveys said, all in, what's your top technology decision? What's going to drive your technology decision making this year? By far and away was the platform. And that makes a lot of sense, because the platform is not just about processing e-commerce transaction these days. What's happened over the course of the last 2 years as digital commerce accelerated is that if you think of the platform, e-commerce platform, it is now the mothership. And all the digital touch points across those channels, EDI, procurement, sites and apps, marketplaces, all of that plugs into the motherboard of what is the e-commerce platform. So platforms aren't just for driving e-commerce sites. What that has become is the hub to the spoke of digital technology. There's a lot to do there. And the number one reason that a lot of companies are putting in place a lot more interest, a lot more resources, a lot more budget, a lot more time and energy into their technology stack is very, very simple. If you give the customer the experience they demand, they're going to come back to you. If they don't, they will not come back. And our research shows, and now we're going to jump into our panel here, which is that it's not just digitizing and giving the excellent user experience across just the e-commerce site. Keep in mind, your digital customers from a manufacturing perspective weave in, weave out from a lot of digital touch points, and all of that has to be factored into the technology stack. And with that, I'm going to introduce Jay Schneider from B2B Squared. He's going to kind of walk you through, the elements of today's chat. Jay, it's all yours.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. So wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that are included for manufacturers. We have the digital commerce system here that we use for here at B2B Squared, and that system, if you look at it right away, you'll see that one of the things that's different for manufacturers is this channels section of the system. So last month we did a webinar like this, similar for distributors about the technology stack, and what we didn't have was channels. So what we're going to talk about today is how the channels affect the customer experience and the different areas of the technology stack for manufacturers. So if we move to the next slide, we can see that this is actually the different elements right here that a manufacturer might have in their technology stack. So we have CRM, which is obviously the sales side. We have PIM, which is product data, that many manufacturers are now realizing needs to be included in their stack. And then we have this e-commerce question for obviously manufacturers historically have had in the B2B space, have had channel partners. Maybe they didn't sell directly, but now we have e-commerce platforms that give them the capability to showcase their catalogs, potentially sell in certain areas, and serve certain channels depending on how their business runs. So we have CMS, which is the content, and DXP, which is the experience side, which is content plus. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about DXP here today. And then the other areas of search, artificial intelligence, and marketing automation that could also all be included in this stack. So these are the things that manufacturers are having to weigh as they consider how they're going to serve their channel partners. And so what I wanted to just do is maybe just start out with one question to our panelists here, just to kind of set the stage here for what we're going to talk about. And I'll start here first with John. I guess from the perspective of the technology stack, what are you seeing as the pillars for your manufacturing customers' technology stack these days, and what advice are they seeking from you?
Yeah, so thanks, Jay. So I'm seeing a couple of things. One, specifically with industrial manufacturers, discrete manufacturers, folks who make and manufacture complex products.
John, with complex. Muted.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay, looks like Lori can hear me. So what I see from industrial manufacturers, discrete manufacturers, is that they're doing a couple things. One, they've got complex products, complex parts that comprise those products, and they need functionality to help keep their assets organized, pictures, spec sheets, things like that. They need a platform of engagement so that when those assets are disseminated via a commerce site, for example, you can find the right product for the right make and model. And then they need to tie that functionality, that platform of engagement. Where do we go for service? Where do we go to find aftermarket parts? You need to tie that into the rest of your organization. So your marketing automation, your CRM, your sales efforts. So the platform of engagement doesn't exist in a silo. It needs to be connected into the rest of your business, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And actually, I'll ask the same question to Brandon. What are the pillars for your manufacturing customers, and what type of advice are they seeking from you in this discovery phase?
Yeah, so in a very similar fashion to what Jonathan was talking about, a lot of the manufacturing customers we're talking to, and you alluded to it in the stack, are thinking about how their go-to-market models might be different and what channels they're going to use. And as those customers think more and more about perhaps a direct-to-customer channel, then they start fleshing out some of the other needs that they might have around how they manage order-to-cash processes, how they might offer lines of credit and trade credit to the customers that they work with. And one of the challenges that comes out of that discovery process is, in the past, if manufacturers have worked with a handful of distributors or resellers, for example, they might find themselves now suddenly being faced with tens of thousands of end e-commerce customers. And so it really changes how they have to think about approaching that, dealing with that. And so very often the conversations we have, because we have more of a payments bent to the conversations we have with manufacturers, it's really around that. How do you scale that out? How do you deal with it? How do you deal with fraud? How do you deal with bad debt risk? How do you scale all of those processes if you're switching to more of a direct to customer channel model?
Good, that's great, that's great. So this one, Scott, I'll throw this one your direction. Obviously, Garlock is an industrial manufacturer. What does a technology stack look like in 2022 for a manufacturer, an industrial manufacturer like Garlock, and what questions are you asking yourself for the future?
Yeah, and Jay, Garlock is an old company, so and I think with most manufacturers, the technology stack has changed significantly with the drive to digital. So I mean, one thing that's probably missing on your slide, every industrial manufacturer has an ERP, which is probably the workhorse behind manufacturing from an order management, manufacturing, supply chain standpoint. But that is kind of like, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, that's pretty much the main technology that we had. CRM, we had, but systems were not integrated together. But starting 5 years ago, we've invested in a PIM, or product information management platform. Digital asset management, e-commerce platform. Those are kind of the key drivers, which kind of like pulling everything together to have a digital experience for our customers. But it doesn't end there, right? It's integration platform. We have best of breed applications. We don't have a single suite platform. Marketing automation, analytics, SEO. But also heat mapping and some of the things that we've been getting some great feedback from our customers on is feedback, some sort of feedback mechanism direct from our website.
Awesome. That's
great. You mentioned about like what are we asking ourselves for the future? We're potentially a better CMS or separate CMS from our e-commerce platform, translation management systems, and also punch out integration as well.
Awesome. That's great. That's great, and it's a good point. Yeah, the technology stack slide didn't mention ERP. I mean, those are really just the pieces, and only a few of the pieces that are outside of the firewall, right? You've obviously got everything else that's inside the firewall. So it's a good observation there. So before we get any further, just thought I would jump into our first poll question here. Love to get your perspective on this. So if we can go to the first question here. So how many channels does your company currently support? And so we'd like to give you the opportunity to select all that apply here. So so distribution partners, so your traditional channel partners, if that's an area you support, please check that one. Direct to consumer, Amazon, B2B marketplaces, direct to consumer marketplaces, and then if there's any others that come to mind, certainly I would be curious. There's no box for others, but we'll certainly be exploring that as we go along here. So so one announcement I'll make, we will have some time for some questions towards the end of the presentation. So please, if you have the opportunity to put something in the question box for our panelists, we'd love to jump into that when we have a little bit of time towards the end of the presentation. So with that, if everybody's had the opportunity, let's go ahead and look at the results of that poll. So how many channels does your company currently support? And we can see here that direct-to-consumer and distribution partners are equal. Wow, that's really interesting. Amazon is 20%, B2B marketplaces are 50%, and direct-to-consumer marketplaces are 30%. So very interesting. So distribution partners and direct-to-consumer are equal here, at least for this survey here today. So thanks for your feedback. Yeah, well, let's jump in a couple other questions for the panel here, and I'm looking forward to talking through sort of this channel area and how you support your channels a little bit further. So let's start with you, Scott. Could you talk a little bit about the different channels that Garlock supports and maybe some unique factors that you guys have to consider in serving each?
Yeah, Garlock, in North America, as an industrial manufacturer, the types of products that we make and the industries we serve, in North America, we have a very strong distribution partner network. So predominantly in the North America, most of our sales are through our distribution partners. We do have some OEMs as well. And then, outside of North America, that picture switches. So it's mostly, it's very little distribution partner network, but then also it's what I'm going to call direct to business, not direct to consumer. A little bit different there from a tax exemption standpoint. So, but that's one of the unique factors, right? When we're selling to businesses, there's tax exemptions. We've got customer specific pricing, customer specific catalogs, regional catalogs. Those are, then also we have industries that are somewhat highly regulated. And that makes some of the complexities of B2B business and the e-commerce a little bit more challenging from an industrial manufacturer standpoint. So in a highly regulated business like nuclear, military, aerospace, those kind of businesses, they may require some special care during the order process, like certifications and extra, inspections, traceability, things that they request that might be per item that they order. So those are some exceptions and things that we have to deal with.
Are you guys starting to build some of those into your e-commerce platform too?
We're trying to do the 80-20 rule. So let's focus on the easy stuff, and then we're kind of setting some of those things aside. But yes, we're keeping those things in mind with how can we do those? How can we create a digital experience for those in the future?
Awesome, great. So Brandon, I'll start with you on this one. What are some unique business problems that you see your customers trying to solve as it relates to the channels they support? You mentioned some of them in terms of just the quantity of people, but are there others?
Yeah, so I think Scott mentioned a couple that we definitely see with some of the customers that we work with. So if you're selling to government entities, for example, you need to keep track of the fact that they have a tax exempt status, and you need to be able to deal with that. And that stuff gets refreshed all the time. So it's not something that you do once and it's done. You have to periodically revisit it. More and more often we find that customers of, buyers and sellers are finding each other for the first time online, where in the past that may not have happened. It may have come through a distribution partner, or it may have come through a salesperson. And so when that occurs, there's additional steps you have to take to validate the business, validate the person you're dealing with at the business, make sure if you're offering them trade credit, for example, that it's a real company. One of the things we've seen with the customers we've worked with is there's a surprisingly amount of business identity theft, particularly in this trade credit space, which nobody's really talking about, but there's a little bit of an arms race there where the bad actors are doing a tremendous job of figuring out where the holes are in your credit and underwriting process if you acquire new customers. And if you take that and extrapolate that globally, then the problems just become significantly more complex in terms of dealing with different forms of taxation, dealing with these fraud types of issues. So I think the e-commerce is a wonderful new channel. It lets you be a local manufacturer and distribute globally effectively, but it creates all kinds of other challenges that you have to deal with as you find and uncover these customers in new parts of the world. And so that's a lot of what we see when we interact with our customers.
Interesting. Yeah, good stuff. So John, I'll ask you the same question. What unique business problems are you seeing there at Adobe that the folks are trying to solve and supporting their channels?
Yeah, so in working with industrial manufacturers and even coming from that sort of the manufacturing side myself, I think what my customers and I are working on and working through is, you've got these existing channels like we were talking about before. So as Scott said, Garlock's a well-established company, and they've had sales channels before these e-commerce trends. And I think what's going on now is sort of a re-curation of what are the channels, what are each of them for? And I think that's what the work is being done right now. Like, what do each of these channels do? If we're selling on Amazon Business, what's that for? If we're selling direct, what's that for? If our distributors are selling our products, what are they? When do we use them? And what you don't curate grows wild. So I think that is driving a lot of the technology stack. So for example, one execution I see are marketplaces. So how do I sell direct to customers but not alienate my existing distribution channels? I make them third-party sellers. I steal a page from Amazon's book and way. And I also maybe use Amazon as an additional channel for more transactional. I leverage my distribution partners for a marketplace, and maybe my distributors are sort of that white glove treatment. So and to sum it up, I'm seeing a reconfiguration, a recuration of different channels, and that to me is driving the technology stack discussions with my customers.
Good point. Yeah, it's we're seeing obviously marketplaces are starting to become a more dominant factor at all of this, and so I guess getting a little bit more into the customer experience side. Obviously, it's a really broad topic, but if we just take a step back, what process? And John, I'll start with you on this one. What process do you see your customers taking to inform themselves of what good customer experience looks like and how they can truly support the channels properly?
Yeah, so a lot of the industrial manufacturers, discrete manufacturers that I work with, one of the first things they ask me for is like, who in my space or even who adjacent to my space is doing this? So there's sort of a search for best in class, right? And I think what's going on is there are a lot of pilots, selling with salespeople. How do we augment their capabilities? Selling maybe without salespeople for the long tail of our customers. How do we make it very turnkey to buy from us and work with us and address service issues online, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like everybody's kind of doing pilots, or many people are doing pilots, not everybody, in these different kind of use case categories. And what I'm starting to see now is, I think post-pandemic, stringing those together so that you have more of a true end-to-end. And everybody's very interested in kind of like, what is this, what is Caterpillar doing? What is John Deere doing? And sort of leveraging that. What is 3M doing? And then even taking a page from other industries. Because the nice thing about some of these use cases is that on the B2B side, it's a different kind of business approach, business motion, but some of those use cases can be tried and true and kind of like lifted, shifted, but altered, right? Because in B2B, it's not just the product, it's what you do and how well you do it and how easy you are to work with. So there's some looking around the neighborhood and seeing how everybody else is doing it going on that I see for sure.
Interesting. So Brandon, same question to you, just in terms of customer experience. What processes do you see your customers using to sort of inform their decisions about supporting channels?
Yeah, so I think John touched on a couple of key points, which is how do you make your, the one that stands out most when we talk to our customers is how do you make yourself the easiest supplier to deal with? How do you become the easiest partner, for the customers that you're working with? And specifically in the order to cash process, in the ordering cycle, and even the way you produce invoices, even the way you deliver those documents to your customers, a lot of it is about aligning with the way they buy, aligning with their procurement practices, with some of the tools that they might use. Very often we see when we engage with clients, doing simple things like being able to stick, really simple things like being able to stick their purchase order number on your invoice makes you easier to deal with. Being able to actually load those invoices, for example, directly into their ERP system or their invoice portal. So a lot of this is not necessarily just about what you make or the services that you provide. It's also about those ancillary things around it that make you an easier partner for them, somebody who's easier to deal with. And frankly, the easier you are for AP and for procurement, probably the larger share of wallet you're going to get from your customer. So when we often talk to our clients about this, we refer to the fact that historically it's been about brand loyalty, and more often our consumer experiences are driving us to an experience loyalty. Who's easier to work with? Who aligns more with the way I do business?
Right. Well, and what we know about B2B, and that B2B customers are really, they desire self-service, right? And I think that very much speaks to what you're finding there. So that's great. So Scott, there at Garlock, what have you guys done to sort of inform the experience that you're gonna build online?
What do you mean by inform?
Well, just what processes have you guys used to define customer experience?
So some of the things that we did engage some customer journey mapping early on in our process, and we do kind of still do that today. We just got through launching a new e-commerce website, so but as we are getting and identifying those areas for opportunity of improvement, that's where we start to a customer journey like map experience of, okay, what do we need to do to kind of solve the problem and make sure that this experience is better for that customer. But some of the stuff that we're seeing is just so low hanging fruit, just to try to get some things implemented so quickly. But we'll definitely resurrect some more thorough processes in the future as we progress and things get more complicated.
Do you guys continue to use the journey mapping exercise as you go through this?
Yeah. In a way, it's kind of an abbreviated version.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Good to see that it can continue to be dynamic and continue to inform what you guys are doing. A great exercise, obviously, for knowing what the journey is that your customers take and how you can solve it better. So. So Scott, can you talk a little bit about how Garlock is supporting different types of channels from a product experience perspective? Are there different configurations or different things? You talked a little bit about some of the things, but I'm just kind of curious from a product experience, what types of things might you guys be doing supporting differently in different channels?
Yeah, so we do have quite a few distribution partners with their own e-commerce websites. So we're trying to feed them data to make sure that the data is consistent between our website and their website. But their websites, every website is going to be a little bit unique in terms of its capability. So one of the things that we're trying to focus on, from a product experience standpoint, is trying to make the Garlock website, our own website, as helpful as possible to that customer, to be able to find products, select products, things of that nature that some of our distributors quite, their websites aren't quite up to the as ease of use in terms of all the attributes and the filters and the facets that our website has. So we're trying to really, we're working with our distribution partners to try to get there. But right now it's making sure our data is consistent, accurate across, wherever it's presented. But in the future, as we progress, we're definitely going to be trying to figure out, multi-experience data, like content for our product.
Okay, great. So John, I'll go to you next here. I guess maybe just the first part of this, I know we talk about experience platforms. maybe if you could just differentiate a little bit what an experience platform is versus, say, a CMS or just an e-commerce platform, and then also maybe talk a little bit about, what are some of the unique problems that your customers are trying to solve with an experience platform specific to the different channels they're supporting.
Yeah, sure. So lots of definitions that I've seen. I feel like, different analyst reports I read about what an experience platform is, it gets a little bit changed each time. I think where the rubber hits the road in terms of how it's being thought of in the marketplace by industrial manufacturers, discrete manufacturers, is you think of the lead to cash process. So from an unknown customer, or maybe a known customer, leading all the way through, the sales interaction or research online, then sales interaction, quoting, purchasing online, service issues, collecting that data, repeat. And it's being built, I think, more modularly now than it had been in the past, right? With headless commerce and other trends like that, which we'll get into. But I think that if that's the definition, I think one of the key problems or challenges that my customers are working with is, I think, Scott, you touched on it earlier, is, in B2B, you're your products, but you're also what you do and how you do it, right? So that journey mapping, it's tough to do. It's the hard work, but yet it can't just be a front end. An experience platform can't just be a front end. It can't be like, the old Western movies where it's like the propped up on the set. It's like the propped up storefront. It's got like a piece of wood propping it up. You got to have the back end too. The ERP, you're totally right, Scott, is the heart of an industrial manufacturing company in terms of like how they track their inventory, how they're making money. So there's got to be journey mapping, not just from the front end forward to the customer, but back end too. So for example, how do you tie in your inventory levels to your commerce platform so people know, okay, there's 50 of these, and if I order one, I can have confidence it's going to arrive, and then I know when it's going to be either delivered or manufactured and delivered. And I see that integration as being kind of a lot of the work that some of the customers that I've talked with over the past several years are working in for like true transparency, because that transparency kind of builds trust, builds the brand, and also allows them, the end customer, to plan on their end for their own business and their own operation. So again, not just the product, but you are what you do and how you do it. And that full end-to-end kind of journey mapping, I think, is important.
It's a good point, and I think we learned during the pandemic, it's almost impossible to talk about a customer experience without talking about fulfillment, right? When they're actually going to get it, and do you have it in stock? So so good stuff there. In terms of payment processing, Brandon, what are the different channels that you see your customers supporting, there at TreviPay?
Yeah, so I think the team here has covered some of this already. So I'll just reiterate it. It's really, we saw certainly during the pandemic a real rise in digital channels and digital first channels. We obviously see the customers we work with working a lot with existing distribution models. Scott spoke a little bit about how that works for them. We also see exactly what Scott outlined, which is real differences between where you might be domiciled in your home country and kind of your home turf, and how you might operate outside of that, in a place like Europe, for example. And obviously, as you move between these different geographies, how you set up, and which channels become the predominant ones, or your preferred go-to-market model, might really be fundamentally different. So we see all of the above, really. I think the piece and the theme out of this, and I think John touched on this earlier, is being really thoughtful and systematic about how you tackle that. Otherwise, I think, John, you made the point that these channels will just grow wild. Yeah. I think that's entirely accurate. I think the customers we see that execute this best are really pretty thoughtful about where there's scope for a direct to business channel, where they might have a direct, or a relationship through distributors. And then, Scott, you made the point around how you can support those distributors, because they may not have the infrastructure that you have, or the product, or the PIM information, or have it in an easily available form to present to the customers. And so how do you make them more competitive when they're interacting with the end customers? So we see all of the above. I think the mega trend, if there is one, is that there is definitely a move to more of this happening online. and it being more digital.
Yep, absolutely. What we all are seeing on the street. So, well, this has been great. Opportunity to talk about channels and how manufacturers have to support them. I'm gonna turn this back over to Mark now to talk a little bit more about the purchasing process, the transaction, and how manufacturers are dealing with that side of it as well. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Jay. My mistake on that for a sec. Hey, let's bring this down to brass tacks here. The stakes here for this thing could not be higher. These are not just discretionary, one-time fits-all technology decision-making that's going on here. This is make or break stuff. You know, the last 2 years have changed all that. So if we're going to look at what technology manufacturers are purchasing, then the timeline for doing this could have been 2 years ago, 2 years, 18 months. Now you're talking a time compression of 6 months or less. That's how much the world has changed just the last 18 months. And more importantly, it's not just the end goal to have an e-commerce site that serves your customers. As we mentioned at the start of the timeline here, what's driving all of this from a technology perspective is that you, the manufacturer, are serving a digital first customer. And yes, that customer might be so-called omni-channel, but guess what? It's a digital strategy driving all those access points. So the technology decision-making here could not be more relevant or frankly more important. So let's take a look at our next poll question. I'm curious to see out there in audience land how your research compares to ours. So which of the following is your company evaluating for purchase in 2022? Experience platform, content management system, site search, PIM, or e-commerce platform? You folks vote, and we'll come back in 1 second and see how your research compares to ours. And we're going to break that down somewhat. Okay, what do we have? A little bit different, but you know, a little bit different from the three surveys that we at DC360 have done on these very same topics. But what I find interesting here is if you look at the top two, is customer experience tied to that digital technology and that user experience I've been kind of talking about for my portion of the panel discussion here, plus the platform. And the platform has to be a lot of new things these days as it becomes the hub to the spoke of serving these digital first customers. So let's go back to our slide here. And Brendan, let's start with you for this one, which is, you know, it used to be that manufacturers made things, wholesalers, distributors, and other sellers sold things. You know, there's been a lot of change where now manufacturers can indeed be distributors, or if they choose to be on a marketplace, they could be buyer and seller. So a lot of ground has shifted, and guess what? That has impacted how companies are looking at e-commerce technology, including payment systems. So if we're kind of in a world of change here, what are you seeing for the technology stack that's breaking out to payment systems as it relates to those top two choices, you know, experience and the platform? What are you seeing?
Yeah, we're seeing, you know, firstly, we saw a tremendous acceleration in all of this during the pandemic as more, you know, as more interactions shifted to digital, shifted to, you know, like just the tools we're using today to reach and talk to viewers and customers. We just saw a tremendous lift in that. So fundamentally, you know, what that comes down to is we've seen a lot of manufacturers really evaluate in certain markets and for certain categories of their customers and for certain types of products, having a more direct to business strategy. We focus on B2B, so that's really where we've seen that activity. And what's driving a lot of it is just simply having the relationship with the end customer and knowing what they're likely to buy in the future based on what they've bought in the past. So one of the things we haven't perhaps yet spoken about is the challenge of seeing all the data. If you're the manufacturer and somebody sits in between you and the customer, you don't necessarily know what those customers are buying. You don't necessarily know where the white space is, and you don't necessarily know whether your channels are being effective at getting to the white space. And so obviously one of the things that's really powerful with a direct to business strategy is you start to see that, and you start to see the differences between, well, why is customer A buying 10 things from me and customer B is only buying 2? And is that a pricing issue, or is it an understanding issue? Is it a service issue? And you can go through that process of unpacking what might be driving that behavior. Now, the challenge with that is there's a whole new set of skills you have to learn as the manufacturer. And in some cases, you might want to learn them. And in other cases, you might want to outsource them. But it's some of the points I made earlier about how do you deal with this now much larger universe of customers who you're working with. And that's everything from how do you produce invoices to them, how do you collect from them, how do you give them credit lines, all the pieces that we typically play and offer services in. But it's been amazing to see the compression. You mentioned it, Mark, but we probably believe that 3 to 4 years worth of digital transformation got compressed into the last 18 months.
Hey, Jonathan, we're going to pivot to you here. So you're Adobe, you guys get around the block. What I mean by that is you have insight into a lot of manufacturing companies across a lot of verticals. And you made the point earlier that what's passing for technology decision-making could be as varied as the industry itself. So my question to you is, are customers leveraging e-commerce to sell in areas where they didn't do that before? And if so, what examples of that are you seeing?
Yeah, so a couple of examples. Number one, like I mentioned a little bit before, viewing their commerce sites is not just like selling their parts and their base models and the parts that comprise those base models, but selling things that are sort of like secondary and tertiary in the category via marketplaces is one example. So giving people more of a reason to come there because there's more on the shelves, so to speak. Other things I'm seeing are getting into non-physical products. So it could be as simple as warranties or service contracts or software upgrades that are a very profitable way to sell those kinds of products, because sometimes those products can be very profitable, and it can be sold and marketed, those kind of things, in an automated fashion. So somebody buys X physical product, they're immediately approached about a service contract or a warranty add-on, or a service and software upgrade package, or maybe like resupply bundles of parts on top of that. So it's always kind of a and this and this and this. From there, I think I hear I'm in a lot of discussions about product as a service. So leveraging IoT. How can we give our customers through our commerce portal a platform where they can see the different machines that they have in operation in the field? Are they in or out of operation within the specifications for running? Are they okay? Are they green? Are they red? Are they yellow? And then being able to like order parts for each of those things, or tweaking some of the settings on the machines themselves. So lots of runway for growth and change, and definitely not just a put this in your cart and that's the end of the story experience from now on.
Hey, Scott, I'm not a manufacturer, but I do play one on TV. So here's my question to you, which is, we are talking to quite a few people, in our journalistic research at DC360, where people on the manufacturing side are indeed telling us that it is a digital first customer across the various touch points. But before we kind of move into a technology question for you, could you talk about that for just a sec? Are you guys seeing that? Or no? Or is that kind of a bit of a misnomer? In other words, the customer you're serving today, they're digitally driven across a lot of channels, not just the e-commerce site.
Oh yeah, I think absolutely. I'm looking at the traffic to our website. A lot of it's just coming from Google, right? We got Google Internet searches. The number one place that our customers we're finding people are going are right to, Google, just doing an internet search for a solution, a product, what have you. But and it's the same thing with, they're finding our sites, they're finding distributor sites, but digital has been growing, especially with the pandemic. We've seen an increase in just traffic to our website. So yes, it's It's happening.
Now, channel partners are all important here. Are you seeing the same channel partners that you've seen prior to the pandemic you're seeing now? Are you seeing new ones? And if so, how has that changed what you're doing with your technology decision making? Keep in mind, the slide that the audience just showed says two things are top of mind: user experience, platform. So if that's what's top of mind with the audience, what are you seeing at Garlock in terms of how channel partners are influencing what you're doing with new technology?
We have, it's interesting that Garlock's industrial manufacturing distribution partners, there's very few of them that are like really digitally enabled, but what we're seeing is consolidation amongst the industry. So we're getting some, some of these larger distributors just kind of absorbing some of these smaller distributors, but they're and the ones that are the smaller ones that are wise, they're investing in e-commerce and or an e-commerce website. So they're catching on to they're making an investment, just making it easy for people to buy their products. And the things that we're hearing from them is, there might be very small regional distributors that now have opened up to having customers that are basically throughout the world. So it's like they had a very small region, open up an e-commerce shop, and then all of a sudden it's just like their markets are just growing.
So Jonathan, I want to pivot back to you on this very same point here, which is channel partner integration as it relates to influencing technology decision making for this technology stack. You guys have been pointing out for the past 47 minutes here that it's there's all kinds of new sheriffs in town. You have new channel partners. So my point is, how has that changed the digital technology selection process for manufacturers? What are you seeing? Who are these new channel partners and what do they want? Are manufacturers giving it to them? You tell us.
Yeah, so a couple things. Number one, what I'm seeing is a fragmentation of the tech stack for sure. I mean, there's a slide that we use internally where it shows like how many marketing automation solutions, very broadly, were there like 7 or 8 years ago, and how many are there now? And the left side of the slide is like a bunch of logos, and the right-hand side of the slide is a million little logos, right? So there's definitely a proliferation of capabilities. In terms of the channel partners, I think it ranges from what is our strategy for Amazon Business, if that's applicable to our industry or our endeavors as a company. For my customers, do we have our own store on there? Do we have punch outs on our distributors' sites? Do we partner with some of our technology partners to sell on their site and they sell on ours? So I think it's sort of I don't like buzzwords, but it's omni-channel sort of made real. Everywhere you see me is an ad, and I'm going to make sure that you see my products everywhere that they're applicable, whether it's at this reseller, at this repair company that services my products outsourced, or maybe on Amazon Business if that's the case, and on my website. The trick is you got to find a purpose for each of these. Just being everywhere isn't enough. You got to define why am I in each place and what job separately am I doing. Otherwise, it can get messy.
Hey, Brandon, let's kind of pivot back to payments here for a sec, because payments are kind of top of mind when it comes to some of the new technology stack we're talking about here. So what can manufacturers do to support the transaction at checkout, regardless of the channel?
Yeah, I think there's not necessarily real rocket science here. It's really, we see the customers we work with really leaning into providing trade credit to their clients. It's one of the ways that you can build loyalty with your customers, give them payment terms, produce the invoices in a way they want to receive them, put those invoices in the right place inside of their accounts payable departments. But not necessarily all manufacturers want to do that themselves in a direct to business model. And so a lot of the help we provide, a lot of the customers we see are kind of grappling with that they feel the need to pivot, or they are changing their go-to-market model, but they don't necessarily have the muscle memory or the desire, frankly, to do that at scale with a direct to business model. But it's honestly, Mark, it's not like it's reinventing a process. It's more about completely digitizing it, streamlining it, making it a much better experience. So for example, one of the things we see very often is if you do have a trade credit solution for your clients as a manufacturer today, how long does it take you to underwrite them? Is that something that feels like a 1 week or a 2 week kind of paper-based, painful process to give somebody a new credit line? Is there any sort of transparency in it and so on? Do they know where they are in the process? And so a lot of this is just about taking those existing processes, completely digitizing them and doing them in near real time. The customers we work with, we underwrite most of the client base in 30 seconds or less. And if you think about that versus a paper-based 1 week long process, that's a much better customer experience.
And I've got one more question for Scott and Jonathan before I pivot back to Jay here, which is, so I want both of you folks to kind of tag team this one, which is, what are the different transaction models you see manufacturers leveraging on the experience on the platform? So Jonathan, let's start with you on that. Then we'll give Scott the final word before going back to Jay for our wrap-up questions here.
Yeah, I think the traditional model was, part X for Y dollars, right? So what I'm seeing more of is trying to get into subscription-based models, OpEx as opposed to CapEx, product as a service, PaaS. So using IoT and telemetry, to pay for uptime. I've got a machinery company, a couple of machinery companies that are charging per diem subscriptions for a working machine in that location. So they're not selling a device, they're selling a solution in place, and they're agreeing to make sure that there's always uptime on that device or scheduled downtime that's done far in advance. Or I'm seeing pay for outcome. So there's a packaging machine company that, one example is they could have pricing based on how much money they've saved customers by eliminating excess space and customized packaging and wrap machines, right? That's a big difference in selling, packaging material by the square foot. So it's also more lucrative potentially. And if you're providing a solution and a service to your customer, they're not as worried about your change in pricing model. They just want the solution and they'll pay a fair price for it.
And Scott, what about you? What different transaction models are you seeing about customers, how they're leveraging the experience with you folks?
Well, Garlock, from a transaction standpoint, most of our customers are on credit with us. So we have our own department in terms of transactional. So we're pretty much just a PO transaction base, but we are also a credit card. So, if I'm understanding your question correctly, those are pretty much the predominant transaction standpoints that Garlock does as an industrial manufacturer.
All right. Well, Jay, I think you have some other follow-up questions for our panel this afternoon.
Yeah, I got a couple other questions here. We got just a couple of minutes. Actually, I'll throw this first one out back to you here, Scott. Are you guys selling today? Is Garlock selling directly on either Amazon or Amazon other B2B marketplaces? Or are you just supporting channel partners who are doing that? And if so, what are you doing to help them?
Yeah, we actually experimented with Amazon a few years ago. We did it for a couple of years. Some challenges with the products that we serve and the industries we serve is what we kind of recognize. But Jonathan mentioned a few things that we're investigating, which is how to leverage our distribution partner for that white glove experience. But how to do a transaction, whether that's leveraging Amazon, but also including a distribution partner within that transaction. So we're also looking at some things from our website as well. How do we include our distribution partners in there? But the Amazon, it'll be coming up again from a different strategy.
Okay.
Product segmentation, what's the right products to sell through that channel?
Gotcha. Okay. And just more of a figuring out what the strategy is before just unpackaging one option that's supposed to serve everything. So
yeah, and I think Jonathan mentioned it. It's a huge competitive, to our distribution channel. It's a competitive space, right? So it's instead of selling direct, how do we kind of maybe leverage that channel with our distribution partners?
Yeah, so that's great, and I guess I'll ask the same question to you, Jonathan. Do you see the manufacturers that you guys are working with? Are you seeing many of them start to go direct on Amazon, or are they just continuing to serve channel partners? And what do you see them doing to help support that?
Yeah, so I hear a couple of things. Number one, the first category would probably be exactly what Scott said in the exact way that he phrased it. You know, we've been trying some things with Amazon, and you know, we had some challenges. There were some maybe parts of it that were good. They're sort of dipping their toe in the water. I think it goes back, and I know I'm a bit of a broken record on this. I think you have to determine what the channels are for. And Scott hit on this as well. Like, you've got to have, you know, you've got an existing revenue pie that's divided between your distributors, maybe some direct, and a couple other channels, right? And you know, what I'm hearing is some of the manufacturers that I'm talking with, who will remain nameless so that they can work through this, but they're having to determine, okay, if it's just transaction, if it's just selling a widget, I can do that. And I could do it through my D2 customer website, right? If Amazon does that, it's at a lower margin, right? Because Amazon's got to make their cut. And if distributors are just transacting, that's at a lower margin. So there's got to be some prioritization of, okay, the distributors clearly have some benefits to them, right? They've got feet on the street, they've got expertise, they know your products, they know the context that your products are for. You know, is there a set of scenarios and a portion of the addressable market that you do have and you don't have, that you can work with them on what is our approach to that market, and what are the incentives and benefits, right? Because it's not just like, well, you get this part of the business. It's, we're going to develop tools and enablement and financial incentives to help you, Mr. Distributor. And then this is what that channel is for. It's white glove. We're going to provide you marketing, training, whatever is applicable to your business. And then there's the Amazon piece where it's like, okay, what is our maybe limited SKU assortment, or why do people go to Amazon in the first place? And then leveraging that insight with something that financially makes sense for you. And then your D2C website, same thing. What parts, you know, do we want to have that be kind of the gold standard of, this is where you go for really good service because we're providing it, but you're going to pay more for it, that kind of thing.
Interesting. Yep. It's good stuff. One real, just got a minute here, Brandon, but I just thought I would throw this back to you. We've heard here a number of different channels, a number of different models that are emerging. I think that's one of the things that we're all going to be watching as we go forward here. But from your perspective, at the transaction level, you know, when we talk to customers, stuff like that, it's all about friction, right? It's about reducing friction. What are some of the things, maybe outside of some of the things you've already noted, what are some other things you see that you guys are able to help customers with, or you see customers doing at the transaction level to reduce friction?
Yeah, I've touched on a couple of them, but I'll call out one or two others. So, you know, definitely provide more choice to your customers. You know, let them interact with you and buy from you the way that aligns with their procurement practices. That's not always easy to do, but the more you can do that, the larger the share of wallet you're likely to get from them. Jonathan also touched on something that we're seeing as a trend, which is, you know, particularly larger manufacturers creating private vertical marketplaces where they invite some of their, you know, they're not competitors, but they're people who provide other products or services that wrap around the core thing that they might be selling or doing. And so that vertical marketplace can become a destination for your customers where you can drive more volume and add more value to the process. They don't have to shop around. Everything is in one place. More stuff on the shelves, I think, is what Jonathan specifically said. So we definitely see that too. That creates some, you know, execution challenges because you're in a many-to-many interaction model, but that's a very interesting new trend that we're seeing a lot more of.
All right, well, I think that kind of brings us to the top of the hour here. Brandon, Scott, Jonathan, and Jay, thank you so much for an informed chat. We covered a lot of ground, but the point is, I think we also kind of moved the needle for some good content on how to evaluate the technology stat as it relates to that digital customer we've been talking about here for the past 60 minutes. And for attendees today, do not forget that we have a giveaway for you. We'll be getting to you a copy of our 2021 B2B manufacturing report that's got some good analysis and numbers on our take of where we think all of this is going. And that is about a $400 value. So we're thanking you for coming on and spending some time with us today. And we want to thank all our panelists today and for spending an hour with us. We hope you found the content worthwhile. After we sign off here, you'll see a short pop-up survey on your screen, and please give us a little hand here. If you'll take just a few minutes to fill out the survey with your feedback, we'd appreciate it, because guess what? That helps us delve into the content of what we present to you on these webinars and chats. Hugely important to us to get you what you want. And with that, thank you so much. I'll see you next time. Thank you.